Okay, so back to school. It's a whole vibe, right?
Oh, for sure. For some people, it's all like new notebooks and pencils and that fresh start feeling.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And for others, it's maybe more like a flashback to those first day jitters.
Definitely. I think we've
Okay.
all been there.
So today we're diving into a perspective on this whole back to school thing. That might surprise you a little bit.
Oh, it's going to be
We
interesting.
found this podcast episode, and it's all about blessings and prayers for the new school year.
That's pretty different from the usual back to school stuff we hear about, isn't it? Like, schedules and supply lists.
Right. I mean, those are definitely important. But this source is really focused on the emotional and spiritual side of things.
Yeah, and not just for the students themselves, but for everyone involved, like parents, guardians, even teachers.
Exactly. It's like acknowledging that there's a whole lot going on beneath the surface.
Right.
All those hopes and worries that come with a new year.
It's that unspoken layer that we don't always talk about.
Right. And this source uses prayer as a way to navigate those deeper waters.
Interesting.
So what we're going to try to do today is figure out what we can learn from this approach, even if we don't necessarily share the same faith background.
Yeah, like are there any universal truths or insights that we can take away from this?
Exactly. So let's start with something that I think everyone can relate to. That feeling of wanting your loved ones to be safe, especially during times of transition.
Oh, absolutely. Like sending your kid off to kindergarten for the first time or even starting a new job yourself.
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah, totally. And the source we're looking at really emphasizes this idea of entrusting children to a higher power for protection.
They even quote a psalm from the Bible, Psalm 121,
Ah, yes, the one about the watchful eye that will not slumber.
and being sheltered in the shadow of his wings.
It's such beautiful imagery, isn't it? It evokes this sense of constant care and protection.
It really does.
Yeah.
And I think that resonates with us on such a deep level, because even if we don't interpret those words literally, that longing for security, for safety, it's universal.
It is, And if you think about it, we try to create that feeling of safety in so many different ways.
Like how?
Well, think about good luck rituals or those little trinkets we carry for comfort. It's all about seeking that sense of protection and reassurance.
It's so true, like those lucky socks for a big game or a job interview.
Exactly. Or even something as simple as a special breakfast routine before a big day.
It's about finding those little things that help us feel grounded and safe when we're stepping into the unknown.
And that need for protection and reassurance, it's not just limited to certain cultures or time periods. It's something that you see throughout history across the globe.
Right, like those ancient talismans and amulets.
Yeah, people have always sought ways to feel safe and protected, especially when facing uncertainty.
Okay, so we've talked about protection, but the source also talks a lot about praying for wisdom and discernment.
Right. hmm They even reference a passage from Isaiah chapter 46, which talks about God knowing the future.
I have to admit, even if I don't believe in divine spoilers, that idea is pretty tempting, right?
Oh, wouldn't it be nice to have a sneak peek at what's coming?
Right. But I think what's really interesting here is that it acknowledges that we can't control everything.
Exactly. We can make plans, we can prepare, but there will always be those unexpected twists and turns.
It's like life's way of keeping us on our toes, right?
You could say that. And regardless of your beliefs, I think this highlights the importance of being adaptable and resilient.
So it's not about knowing exactly what's going to happen, but about having the tools to navigate the unexpected and bounce back from challenges, no matter what they are.
Precisely. It's about being prepared, but also flexible and open to change. And, that actually brings us to another key point that the source emphasizes, the power of support.
Ah, yes. They talk about praying for teachers, classmates, and even for the listener's own strength as a parent or guardian.
It's about recognizing that we don't have to go through this alone. There's a lot of research that actually backs this up.
Really?
Yeah, there's tons of evidence showing how much positive social connections can impact our well-being and our ability to learn and grow.
It's like that saying, it takes a village, right?
It really does. And that's especially true during those back-to-school transitions, when everyone's adjusting to new routines and new expectations.
It's a lot to handle for both kids and adults.
It is. And the source acknowledges that parents and guardians need their own strength and support too, which I think is so important.
You're right, because let's face it, those first few weeks back to school can be pretty demanding on everyone.
Absolutely. Keeping track of permission slips and packing lunches and making sure everyone gets out the door on time. It's a lot to juggle.
Oh, tell me about it. It's like a full-time job in itself.
It is. And the source reminds us that it's okay to ask for help, to lean on our own support systems, whether that's a partner, family, friends, or even a therapist.
We don't have to do it all alone.
Exactly. And speaking of strength, the source also delves into this idea of inviting the divine into the everyday, even those seemingly mundane aspects of the school year.
Now, this one I'm curious about. Does it mean that every little detail matters on some grand cosmic level? Or is it more about finding a deeper meaning in the ordinary?
That's a really good question. It makes you wonder, doesn't it? Like, does a higher power really care if I remembered to pack the granola bars?
Or is it more about approaching those everyday tasks with a sense of intention and gratitude? Maybe that's it.
I think that's a big part of it, and it actually connects with something that goes beyond any specific religion. It's about mindfulness, about choosing to be present in the moment, even amidst the chaos.
So even if we don't interpret it literally, it's more about cultivating that sense of awareness and appreciation, even during those hectic back-to-school mornings.
You got it. It's about finding those little pockets of peace and connection, whether it's through a quiet moment of reflection, a gratitude practice, or simply taking a deep breath and noticing the world around you.
I love that. It's like a reminder that even when things feel overwhelming, there's always room for a little intention and a little grace.
Beautifully put, and it's something that we can all do, regardless of our beliefs or backgrounds.
Yeah, it's amazing how those little things can shift your whole experience.
It's the small, intentional things that often make the biggest difference, right?
Absolutely. And speaking of intentional acts,
Mm-hmm.
this source we're looking at really highlights the importance of prayer, not just for ourselves, but for others in the school community.
Mm-hmm. Like sending out those good vibes and blessings to teachers, classmates, everyone who contributes to that learning environment.
Yeah, and it makes me think back to all that research about the impact of positive relationships on well-being and academic success. It's like those prayers are acknowledging the role that everyone plays in that ecosystem.
Absolutely. It's
Yeah,
recognizing that interconnectedness, and that's such a powerful reminder, whether you're coming at it from a spiritual perspective or just a human one. We all thrive when we feel supported and connected.
it reminds me of a story, actually. Have you ever experienced that power of support firsthand, maybe even back in your own school days?
Oh, definitely. I can think of one time in particular, I was struggling with a really tough physics course in college.
Oh, I feel that physics was not my friend either.
Yeah, it was rough. And I remember feeling so lost, like the concepts were just going over my head.
So what did you do?
Well, instead of just giving up, I decided to reach out to some of my classmates and we started a study group.
That was a good idea.
Yeah, and what started as just a practical way to tackle the material, it actually turned into this amazing source of support.
Oh, I bet.
We would all share our struggles, celebrate small victories, and learn so much from each other's perspectives. It completely transformed my experience in that class.
That's such a great example of how sometimes the best solutions come from connection and community.
Exactly. And the source we're diving into even touches on that. It acknowledges the listener's own need for strength and support, especially if they're a parent or guardian. It's like this gentle reminder that even the caregivers need care.
Yeah, it's like putting on your own oxygen mask first before helping others.
That's a perfect analogy. You can't pour from an empty cup, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about another theme that the source highlights. Inviting the divine into the everyday. They talk about bringing prayer into even the most mundane aspects of the school year.
Right. Like even those little everyday moments.
Yeah, and that's what I'm curious about. Does it mean that every tiny detail matters on some grand cosmic scale? Or is it more about finding a deeper meaning in those ordinary moments?
That's a great question. And honestly, I think it speaks to something that goes beyond any specific religion. It's about mindfulness, about choosing to pay attention to the present moment, even when things feel chaotic.
So instead of just rushing through the morning routine on autopilot, it's about taking a moment to appreciate the way the sunlight streams through the kitchen window while you're packing lunches.
Exactly. Or savoring that first sip of coffee before the day really gets going.
It's about finding those little moments of peace and presence, even when things are hectic.
You got it. And there's actually a ton of research that shows how beneficial these mindfulness practices can be for reducing stress and anxiety, improving focus, and even boosting emotional regulation.
Wow, so it's not just a feel-good thing. It actually has some real science behind it.
It does. And the best part is these practices are accessible to everyone, no matter what your beliefs or background are.
So even if we don't interpret the source's words about prayer literally, we can still embrace that concept of mindfulness and apply it to our own back-to-school routines.
Precisely. It's about creating those little pockets of calm and connection, whether it's through a quiet moment of reflection, a gratitude practice, or simply taking a deep breath and noticing the world around you.
I love that. It's like a reminder that even in the most hectic of times, there's always space for intention and a little bit of grace.
Beautifully said. And speaking of intention and grace, I wanted to touch on something that really stood out to me in the source. The use of specific quotes from the Bible, particularly from Psalms and Isaiah.
Oh, yeah, I was hoping you'd bring those up. They added such a beautiful layer of meaning and depth to the prayers, even without knowing much about their context.
It's fascinating, isn't it, how certain texts, regardless of their origin, seem to transcend time and culture.
Like they're tapping into something universal within us.
Exactly. The Psalms, for example, are known for their raw honesty and emotion.
Like they don't shy away from the tough stuff.
Right. They acknowledge fear, doubt, vulnerability, and I think that makes them incredibly relatable, even comforting.
Yeah, it's like they're giving us permission to feel all the feels, even the messy ones.
And then you have Isaiah, which often speaks with this sense of prophecy and vision, pointing towards a future that's beyond our immediate grasp.
I think that's what I find so powerful about it. Even if we don't interpret those prophecies literally, there's still that sense of hope and possibility.
Like a reminder that there's something greater at work, even when we can't see it.
And bringing it back to the context of back to school, I think that message is particularly relevant. It's a time of new beginnings, of stepping into the unknown. And those words from Isaiah can offer a real sense of comfort and encouragement.
Absolutely. It's like they're reminding us that even amidst the uncertainty, there's a plan, a purpose, something guiding us forward.
And that's a message that resonates not just with people of faith, but with anyone who's ever felt that mix of excitement and trepidation that comes with starting something new.
It's that universal human experience, that blend of hope and fear. And maybe, just maybe, that's why these ancient texts continue to speak to us across the centuries.
It's like they're reminding us that we're not alone in those feelings.
And that there's something bigger holding it all together.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Okay, so before we wrap up, I wanted to circle back to something we touched on earlier. The source's emphasis on the listener's own need for strength and support, especially during those busy back-to-school weeks.
Oh, absolutely. Because let's face it, it's not just the kids who are going through a transition.
Right, parents and guardians are adjusting too, and it's easy to forget about taking care of ourselves in the midst of all the chaos.
So true. And the source encourages us to really tap into those support systems, whether it's our partners, families, friends, or even therapists.
It's a good reminder that it's okay to ask for help. We don't have to do everything on our own.
Not at all. And sometimes the best way to support our loved ones is to make sure we're taking care of ourselves, too.
I think that's a great place to leave it for now. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into blessings and prayers for back to school.
It's been a pleasure. And we'll be back next time to explore even more fascinating perspectives on this whole back-to-school experience.
It's funny how those back to school rituals, like even years later, they can still stick with you,
Yeah.
you know?
It's true. It's such a pivotal time, those back-to-school moments, a lot of change, newness. I think it makes sense that certain routines or rituals would kind of stick.
Totally. And it's not just the practical stuff, It's like those things that help us feel grounded emotionally.
Yeah, those anchors, like having that favorite breakfast on the first day, or that outfit that makes you feel confident. That's like a little boost.
It's about finding that sense of comfort and stability in the middle of all the craziness.
Exactly. So as we've been kind of unpacking all these ideas from the source, what's really struck me is how universal so many of these themes are,
Yeah.
Whether or not we connect with the whole spiritual aspect of it, there's something about those desires for safety, guidance, connection, especially during times of transition, like back to school. It's something everyone can relate to.
I totally agree. It's like we started with this source that was all about prayer, but what we've really uncovered are these fundamental human needs.
Right. And those needs go way beyond any one belief system.
Exactly. It's like we peeled back all the layers and found this common ground, this shared experience that connects us all.
It is. It's really fascinating. So as we kind of wrap up this whole exploration, what stands out to you the most? Like, what's really resonating?
That's a good question. I think for me, what sticks out is this idea that we actually have a choice in how we approach these transitions, like back to school. We can either get totally swept up in all the chaos and the stress, or we can consciously create those little pockets of peace and intention.
That's a really powerful insight. It reminds us that we're not just along for the ride. We have agency. We can choose how we respond to these challenges.
And it doesn't have to be some big, grand gesture, right? It's those small, deliberate acts
Yeah.
that can shift our perspective and create this ripple effect.
Exactly. Like what are some examples?
Well, like maybe it's starting the day with a few minutes of meditation or taking a mindful walk to school or even just really listening, being present when your child is telling you about their day.
It's those small things that can make a huge difference, I think, in how we experience, well, not just back to school, but life in general.
That's true. And as we're kind of bringing this deep dive to a close, I was wondering if you had any final thoughts for our listeners.
I do. I'd like to leave everyone with this. Think about what rituals or practices, whether or not they align with this source we looked at. But what things can you incorporate into your life to create that sense of safety, purpose, connection as you navigate this new school year?
And beyond, it doesn't stop there.
That's a beautiful thought to leave everyone with. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It was my pleasure.
Until next time, keep diving deep and keep exploring those fascinating corners of knowledge.